when we work with the kids, we call it stinking thinking, which is really this sort of barrage of negative statements that a person says to themselves, either about themselves, about their lives, about their situation.
So give me some examples of some of the things you most commonly hear today.
I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm going to fail. That person isn't going to like me. I guess things along those lines.
I don't fit, I don't belong.
Right.
It's never going to happen.
It's never going to happen. But a lot of it has to do, especially with children and especially with adolescents, is I'm going to be rejected. I'm going to fail in some way. I'm going to be seen in a negative light by others because, peer influence is very, very important at that stage. And so in cognitive behavioral therapy, we have a term called cognitive restructuring, which is just a fancy way of saying looking at your thoughts, taking them apart, and then putting back together and again in a way that's more functional. And really what you're doing is you're really asking yourself, okay, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling stressed. What am I saying to myself about the situation that's making me feel stressed? Am I thinking I'm going to end up failing that test tomorrow? Am I thinking that my girlfriend's going to break up with me? What is it that the conversation in my head is all about? And once you've identified what are the sources of this stress that you're experiencing, then you begin to question certain aspects of that. For instance, first of all, how sure am I that what I'm thinking to myself really represents what's happening or what might happen? And there you look at the facts. So what do I know? What has she done? What has he done? How have I done in the past in terms of classes, et cetera? Have I studied? Do I know my stuff? Most of the time, we find that we over-exaggerate the probability that something bad will actually happen or that will fail. But we could take it to another step, which is, let's say the thing that we're afraid of actually happens. Well, how bad would that really be? What would really be the consequences? People kind of play this scene out in their head where they imagine a worst-case scenario, and then it stops. And then they replay that over and over again. They never say, well, what happens the next day or the next month or the next year?
So if we peel the onion, if you peel the psychological onion, then what's really going on? Does it stem from a person's lowered sense of self-esteem? Does it come from their challenge in accepting change in their life? Does it come from their inability to be able to confront certain things in themselves or in people around them?
Probably more than anything else, it's a habitual kind of way of responding. People will tend to avoid things that make them feel uncomfortable, and so they'll avoid challenges at times, and then they end up feeling bad about themselves that they haven't done certain kinds of things, and that feeds their sense of inadequacy, and it becomes a cycle because now I feel less capable about doing the next challenge. Whereas if you recognize that chances are I might do okay, and if I don't do that well, it's no big deal. It's all small stuff kind of thinking, then I'm more likely to take the chances and feel good about the fact that at least I took the risks. And even if I didn't do well, I can move forward saying, it wasn't so bad, I can always try again. And if I did do well, then that very directly feeds my self-esteem and breaks me out of that cycle.
So Ellen, if a person is interested in coming to you, how does it work? Can you take us step by step through the process?
I mean, very specifically, they call our telephone number. They would speak with me first. We ask a basic series of questions in terms of what's going on.
Over the phone?
Over the phone, very briefly, 5 minutes. And then based on what the person is telling me and based on availability and schedule, they would see either myself or one of the other 3 psychologists that we have on staff. At that point, they'd either set up an appointment with me directly or one of the other therapists would then call them, set up an appointment, they'd come in. And typically, the first session is about an hour long. And the focus is really, it's an interview. It's an intake, we call it, where the therapist will be asking a series of questions about what's going on, as well as history and background and that sort of thing. And it also is an opportunity for the therapist to share with the new client what it is that they can expect to get from the therapist and from therapy if they continue to come. So they can leave saying, okay, this is what this person is offering to me. This is what we've decided would be the problems that we would work on and the kinds of things that would happen in therapy. Am I interested in, making the commitment? And the commitment, we usually say ballpark is, a once-a-week kind of therapy, which is a 45-minute session for about a period of 12 weeks, about 3-month period. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. But our main message there is this is not something typically that's a 2 or 3 meeting kind of thing. On the other hand, with this kind of therapy, at least, it isn't something that you're coming 3 times a week for the next 3 years.
I understand. And when does a person know when they need a therapist?
Sometimes they don't. But typically, because we do a lot of work with anxiety disorders, obsessive compulsive disorder, different kinds of stress, social phobias, that kind of stuff, panic, people feel distressed. They want to get better. They feel that their lives are unraveling. They're finding that because they're experiencing the symptoms we talked about earlier, I'm not eating well, I'm losing weight, or I'm eating too much, I'm not sleeping, I'm very irritable, I'm having difficulty concentrating, I'm not doing well at work or in school. Things are happening, and they want to learn how to get control back. Those are the reasons why people usually come to see us.
Well, what's the difference between anxiety disorders and anxiety problems?
It's really just a title. Anxiety itself is not necessarily a problem until it's a problem. And people will often say, well, I feel stress. Everybody feels stress, but I don't feel like I have to go to a therapist. And my response to that is, fine. People come to therapists when, or people should come to therapists when their stress is creating a problem for them. It's not a problem until it's a problem.
I see. And we've talked a lot about unhealthy patterns of thinking. What is it that a person can do to be able to foster healthier patterns of thinking outside of going to a therapist?
Okay. I'll tell you a really good exercise for that. I would suggest to people to go to people who they respect, people who know them, people who are part of their family members or friends, and ask them, what is it that you like about me? What are the things about me that you see are my strengths? Because a lot of times we don't really see it in ourselves, but people will be fine pointing it out to us, and kind of hearing that can be a very nice exercise. Sometimes with people who have a lot of this sort of thinking that we talked about earlier, we'll do a homework assignment. And one of the things about cognitive behavioral therapy is a lot of work is done in between the therapy sessions. It's like school. You learn stuff, and then you have a lot of homework to do in between sessions. For the kids, we call it practice, because homework has a very bad connotation sometimes. But I'll ask people to write down 2 or 3 things that you did really well that day, or that you can feel good about, so that you're teaching yourself to focus on the positive and not always focus on the negative.
What do you feel about, quickly, what do you think about writing affirmations and doing visualizations and writing goals?
All of those are tools, and if they're used effectively, they can be very helpful. In cognitive behavioral therapy especially, there's a long list of different tools that we use for depression, for anxiety, etc. And what I found is I usually share multiple tools for people, and what seems to work really well and what really resonates with one person is not going to work as well with the next. And so I usually say, try this for a while, see how it feels. If you want to adjust it, tweak it around after a while to meet your personal style, that's fine. Or if you want to sort of give up one item or 2 items, that's fine too. Really just gear it up to your own personal way of doing things.
Dr. Alan Wegg, it's been an absolute delight having you as a guest on the Wellness Spotlight today. Thank you so much for sharing your insights in showing our viewers how we can think better and how to have a happier, healthier life.
Thank you so very much for having me again.
This concludes another segment of the East Brunswick Advisory Health Council's Wellness Spotlight. I'm Dr. Ken Freedman, President of the East Brunswick Advisory Health Council, reminding you that wellness works when you work it.